You're tuning in to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and Corey.
Hello, everybody.
Unlocking Your Truth is a talk show about metaphysics and spirituality. We broadcast from CIVL on 101.7 FM across the Fraser Valley from the unceded territory of the Stolo Nation. We also, when we pre-record the show, we do it on our Facebook group, which is the Awaken Your Psychic Abilities Facebook group, and on my YouTube channel, Dr. Leslie Phillips. And not only that, you can catch all of the previous episodes on my website, drlesliephillips.com.
You can?
You can.
Really? Oh boy, I didn't know that.
Yeah, you can. Well, tonight's show, would you like to introduce tonight's show topic, Corey?
If you want me to.
Yes, I think that would be nice for a change.
Yes. Tonight we are talking about religion and spirituality. And I guess the term is, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. And we hear that all the time in the metaphysical realm. And I think it's very true. And it's amazing how those two components of our lives, religion and spirituality, don't always come together. A lot of times they clash with each other, and it's again, I think it's mostly because of the hierarchy in religious stations that don't believe you can be spiritual without being overly religious.
All right.
That's what I think.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Show. So the topic tonight is religion versus spirituality. And that often quoted thing, well, I'm spiritual and I'm not religious. So I guess we should start with a definition of what it is to be religious and what it is to be spiritual. From my perspective, every single human being alive on this planet is spiritual because you are spirit. You are a divine spark. That is who you are. You can't escape it. It's part of your nature. But I think that a lot of times people use the word spiritual to indicate actually a particular form of a belief system that's non-denominational and not quite so easy to define. So more like a new age belief system. I guess the term religion, we might say, is it's a belief system. It's a belief system that groups of people agree together to adhere to, which often includes certain rules that you are expected to follow.
I don't necessarily think that they agree to them. I think they agree to follow them, but they don't necessarily agree with them. Because a lot of people in religions do things because they're told they have to do it, or they will suffer the consequences.
Exactly. Okay, so now we've defined the topic that we're talking about. That put me off. That put me off there, Corey. Now I don't know what I'm going to say.
You tell me I've got to get involved, and then I say something, and I get blamed.
Give me a moment to collect my thoughts, everybody. Yeah, so religion versus spirituality. So I think what I'm going to do is so here's my perspective. My perspective is every single one of us is a unique spark of divine consciousness who has our own direct connection to divine source energy, which some people call God. And so we each have that unique relationship. That is our innate right to cultivate, to have, to communicate in that way. But often what happens when we belong to a group belief system is that that comes in between us and our own direct connection with the divine. And that can happen in spiritual groups as well as religious groups, or groups that would define themselves as spiritual groups. So we have a common belief system. And like I was saying, a common set of rules. And so everyone's expected to match that vibration and be a part of that, adhere to that. So I think what I'll do is I might go through the chakra system and just look at some examples from each of the chakras that we might, and I don't think I'm going to single out individual religions. I think let's just talk about them as, there are various religions on the planet in existence and that have been in existence. And I think all of them at the very core have good intentions in common, and often religions are born because there's been an amazing teacher that brought information into our world, and then a culture or grouping is formed around that teacher. But often what tends to happen is that the original word is lost somewhere along the way. The adherents to the religion or sect identify themselves as a group separate from others, and oftentimes take umbrage with those other groups as being wrong because they're right. So let's look at some examples of belief systems from religions that might impact you on a first chakra level. I think there are plenty of them, actually. One of them might be that you must tithe 10% of your income. The first chakra relates to survival. And so, or in order to survive, you must belong to this group, or you must belong to one of either groups. So let's say you live in Northern Ireland in the middle of the conflict. Well, you need to belong to the Catholics or the Protestants. And I'm sure that there's plenty of other examples like that. So seek shelter amongst the group. You'll be protected if you belong to this group. Yep. It's a survival level belief.
I had a friend of mine who was from Northern Ireland, and I asked him one day, he says, one day you're walking down the road and somebody stops you, he's got a gun and says, are you Catholic or you're Protestant? And I said, well, what do you say? Well,
yeah, right answer.
What do you say? Well, I said, what happens if you say you're Buddhist? They'll ask you, are you a Catholic Buddhist or a Protestant Buddhist? It's so, and to have those two religions be so close in doctrine to each other, it's crazy.
Yeah, so we're looking at religion versus spirituality. And what I thought I'd do is just go through each of the chakras and look at some of the belief systems that are really common that can come in between us and our direct connection with the divine. So we said you've got to belong to the group in order to survive. It could be you have to tithe a certain amount of your income. You will be damned in hell if you're not part of this group. That's another survival-based belief. And I think oftentimes in the past, sometimes it was true that if you joined the monastery, you had a better life than if you didn't join the monastery. You were provided for. There's another survival level belief that says, if you are a man of God or a woman of God, you must be poor. You're not allowed to earn an income. You have to rely on people donating and giving to you. So there's this link between poverty and being a spiritual person. So there's lots and lots of belief systems that get us on a first chakra level. that come at us through, I guess, organized religion or other different, groups that we might belong to. And so let's move on to the second chakra, which is really rich. You have to be celibate, or you have to be celibate until you get married. Certain types of sexual behavior are wrong and should be punished or damned in hell. You are allowed to reproduce, but you're not allowed to have contraception. You're not allowed to have an abortion. So, even if you're raped, you're not allowed to have an abortion. In some religions, there is an inequity between male and female, whereby perhaps if you were attacked or raped, it's your fault and you're a wicked woman. So there's lots of beliefs. I'm sounding like I'm a bit anti-religious, which isn't really true. I'm just trying to demonstrate that how we are indoctrinated or invited to, how we lose our own direct connection with God, sometimes in order to belong to a particular religious or spiritual group. And I'm sure listeners please put in the chat box your experiences of belonging to a religion and how it might have enhanced your life, or the opposite, because I think sometimes it can enhance your life. So, for example, still talking about the second chakra, which is the energy center that relates to the emotions and relationships. It gives you community, a community to belong to feel a part of. To have some support. Back to the first chakra, many religions will look after their own, feed them, not let anyone go hungry. So again, that's a survival level thing. Let's see. Let's look at the third chakra, perhaps, which is relating to energy distribution and also to out-of-body experience. And often things to do with hierarchical relationships, authority, perfectionism, expectations, even, control or be controlled can come up in the third chakra. So oftentimes in an organized religion or spiritual group, there is a hierarchy. There's someone at the top and a hierarchy in between you and your God. And so somebody else is intervening to God on your behalf, or communicating with God on your behalf, or receiving the word of God on your behalf. So again, that unique direct connection that you have with divine source energy is eroded, is not permitted. And especially if your personal information is not in agreement with the main doctrine of the group. And I'll just say that we could also add into this discussion cults, because there are plenty of cults that you might describe as more of a new age thing or an alternative thing to conventional religion, that have that hierarchy, that have that guru at the top, that charismatic figure who decides everything for everybody.
And you see a fair bit of that cult type religions, where in order to come into the religion, you've got to sell all your belongings and bring the money in, and it goes to the cult itself. It's or just bring your belongings in, and they do that. And
then you are in the survival level to the group.
Yeah, and what gets me about that is what you were talking about, is that most of these organizations, and not just cults but larger mainstream religions as well, they profess that you do not have the ability to contact God or be in communication with God. You can pray to God, but only they will receive the answers for you. It's
Yeah,
very interesting.
which is absolutely not true at all. And really, back to our usual topic of psychic abilities, psychic abilities are spiritual communication. And each and every one of us, through our psychic abilities, can communicate with divine source energy and receive our own answers and ask our own questions directly. So let's think a little bit more about the third chakra, see if anything else comes up to relate to that and belonging to a group like this. Well, there can be competition levels, to reach the top of the hierarchy, I guess. Or there can be competition levels to be the best, the best one. I mean, just think of all those ladies in church on a Sunday with their best outfit and their best hat and their hair done, even, So which actually sometimes can be hypocritical, can't it? That people just show up on the single day of worship and then that's ticked the box, as opposed to a daily practice of turning within and connecting with the divine.
Well, one of the things you were talking about, the hierarchy of the different religions, callings. People get the calling to be a priest or a calling to do this, and certain religions have callings. But what's very interesting is the hierarchy tells you what you are. In other words, you're going to be a Sunday school teacher, or you're going to be the person that takes care of the yard, or you're going to be, it has nothing to do with you or your desires, but what they say you need to do and where they see you as.
Yeah. And that's interesting. And I think in some way I could track some origins to that, to the ancient mystery schools. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about that when we come back from these messages.
Yes.
Welcome back, listeners. You're tuning in to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie and Corey. And tonight's episode is about religion versus spirituality. And before the break, Corey was talking about how sometimes in organized religion, as somebody signing on to that, you are given a role by the hierarchy as opposed to choosing it yourself. And it made me think about the ancient mystery schools. And you know what? I don't know that I would. I mean, I guess you might call some of them are within the auspices of what we might now see as a religion. But oftentimes then a similar thing would happen, in that the high priest or priestess would give you information on your level of development and what was appropriate for you. And I think that can work if those people in that position are acting as guides and teachers, and that they are doing it from completely a neutral perspective, and that they are accurately able to see you and perceive you and where you're at, and reflect back at you where you're at and what you need to learn and how you need to learn it. And so
the problem with that is that if you have a congregation like that's 250, 300 people, the hierarchy at the front of the room doesn't see everybody as as an individual person. They don't see them all. Only the certain people stand out, and those are the people that do the major work, and they're usually ones that are called upon to do these things, whereas other people are willing but they never get asked. And so as opposed to feeling like you're fulfilling something within you to help, it's just the opposite for these. They feel that they're not worthy, that they're not able to
Sure.
help.
And I think we were talking about two slightly different things, actually. So you're talking more about a sort of a modern situation, and I was talking about a very sort of, I don't know, high level operating spiritual group. Anyway,
We have a lot of comments, by the way, if you want to hear any of them.
Sure, share them. We only got up to the third chakra, but sure.
Yeah, we can just do these comments and then go from there.
Sure.
We can continue. First one's from Katie, says, a good point. I was wondering the other day why only men can become monks. Buddhism is often seen as a philosophy, but it is a non-theistic religion. And I like your definition of religion. Anyway, I'm not sure if monks were part of this religion or originally. Do you?
That's a really good question. And yeah, I mean, Buddhism is a really, well, I believe it's a pretty old religion. And
maybe I can help you.
well, no, I was just looking at the energy of it, because I think that at least Tibet is you know the story of how when Atlantis fell, there were groups of people that went to different regions of the earth and brought with them the mystery teachings from there, and some of them ended up in Egypt and some of them ended up in Tibet. And so I was just sort of looking at it psychically to see what I saw about that, because I think originally that there were both men and women who were engaged in as teachers and participants. So I don't know where we would say Buddhism began. So what were you going to say about that, Corey?
Well, Buddha's mother, his mother was a very dominant figure in that the beginning of that religion, and people followed Buddha after he had his enlightenment, and they didn't become monks; they just were followers. And I think it was many years later that they were called monks.
Right.
But they were known to have done things like Jesus Christ did, walk on water, and even some of them were said to have fly.
Right. Well, and you know, all of those original teachers did not discriminate against men or women. No. Some of Jesus's disciples were female. His mother was a teacher in her own right, an ascended master in her own right. And so, you know, the origin points of many of these belief systems were actually quite different than they end up developing into.
Yeah. So the next comes from Video Journal. He says, or she, I'm not sure. I find that believing there is a source out there greater than myself that has infinite strength and is here to work through me helps me. I've tried breaking habits, etc., on my own, but it does not work.
Yeah, thank you for that. And, you know, we were saying earlier, everyone has their own unique concept of the divine. And sometimes a religion will tell you what that ought to be, but it's unique to each of us. And I tend to, my personal belief is in a divine source, which is the ultimate source of all things and all beings. That is benevolent and kind of like that person was talking about their concept of God.
Hmm. So Brian says, religion never answered the question for me. It didn't jive with my inner knowing, my inner truth. It didn't make sense to me. Too many missing pieces.
Yeah, I'll make a comment on that because, you know, many of the religious texts, and for sure Christianity, they were written in a symbolic way, in a metaphoric way, not in a literal way, because the people who were originally writing those things were in danger of persecution. And they had to write it in such a way that if you were on the inside of the belief system, it was easier for you to understand. But if you were a stranger that just came upon it, it wouldn't make the same sense to you. It would seem like some kind of a story, but it wouldn't, you wouldn't know those deep esoteric truths. And so, but by meditating on those stories and that symbolism, you can actually unlock the original meaning. So I think that that's the problem a lot of people have in modern day. The literal word of a religion doesn't make sense. And then, you know, you're meant to, trust the word. And, you know, I think, like Brian, a lot of people, it just doesn't feel right.
Well, the thing is, most religions, most of the older religions are centuries old now, and multiple centuries old, and they were created for a people that didn't have books, they didn't have communication systems. They were kept downtrodden in most situations, and that includes a lot of the lords and ladies of the different countries and principles. And so the doctrine that they created kept all those people in line, and government and church and government and state went hand in hand. One was used to help the other to control and keep the people in line. When I listen to when somebody says it didn't jive with my inner knowing, one of the things even from the time I was a little kid of about 8, 9 years old, we used to take in Catholic school, we used to take Catholicism classes. And used to have to cite these: God is all powerful, God is all knowing, God is all loving. And when it came to the God is all loving, and then in the next phrase, they would say, if you don't do what he says, he's going to send you to hell. Well, how can a all loving person, in my understanding, send me to hell? You know, I just, that used to confuse me. And I'm the type of person, when I hear something that I don't understand, I have to stop and I have to contemplate it, and then just keep, it was very interesting. And I agree with Brian, too many missing pieces.
You referred to God in that statement as a person, and that's the thing that I think that humans have tended to do, is personify God. But God is beyond our comprehension, is infinite. He's not a person like we are a person.
True.
Are there more comments?
Yes. Wendy says, I have lots of experience with hierarchies in religion or religions. I was a member of a non-traditional church. Now I can't connect within a traditional congregation. I hear you, Wendy.
Shall I continue, or are there some more comments and questions?
Did you want to comment on that?
Well, not really. It seemed quite self-explanatory.
Yeah. No, I the reason I say I've been very heavily involved in 3 major religions, and now I look back fondly at most of it, but I could not go and sit there every Sunday listening to the same sort of rhetoric that comes out of a lot of people in those. And I agree with you. I mean, church or religion has a place for some people, but for some people, I mean, I feel I've come to a different understanding in my life. This is from Katie, where she's commenting on Brian's earlier comments. She says, same here, Brian. I was raised Catholic. Going to church, Sunday school, youth group, etc. was not particularly special to me. However, as I developed my intuition, I appreciate what I understand and believe about God/spirit. It has helped me make connections.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to continue a little bit to take my little journey through the chakras and examine belief systems that interfere with our direct connection to our own personal God. And we covered the lower three chakras. So the fourth chakra, I mean, that's really the window to unconditional love, the interconnectedness of all things. You know, affinity, your affinity, which is that force that draws you to what you love. And Corey, you were talking about this earlier, that oftentimes a religious doctrine has components in it which are fear-based, which is the opposite of love. If you do this, you'll be punished. If you do that, you'll be punished. You'll be ostracized from the group. You'll burn in hell. And so I think that it causes people to close down their natural inclinations, to close down their heart chakra, to diminish that light of love that is within them. So I believe at the core of most, if not all, religions are teachings about love, but they become misaligned as time goes on, and as the original teacher is no longer here, and man takes a hold of that original word and turns it into a power play or a control device, or some other reason. So, but then again, I'm sure that we can find many characters in history or people who have the experience within a religion of, connecting with the love of the divine. So many of the Christian mystics, for example. And then if we look at the fifth chakra, that's a big one, because really the fifth chakra is all about communication. And so what is the doctrine? What is the doctrine of a particular religion or group? Because you're expected to comply with that doctrine. You're expected to believe the same as everyone else, and which will often mean that you are not fully allowed to express your true authentic self, express your unique perspective. And each and every one of you is a unique individual, and you are meant to shine the light of that individuality here on earth. And so sometimes belonging to a group like an organized religion can quash that spark of individuality.
Definitely.
If I go on to the sixth chakra, then that's also a juicy one, because here we're now talking about your clarity of vision, your clairvoyance. And, there are some religions that would say that that is evil and the work of the devil, for example. And so, you're being denied, you're not being, you're being quashed. The ability for you to see the truth is being discouraged. And crown chakra, we've kind of already talked about that. That's your own direct connection to the divine, your own direct connection to God source energy. And oftentimes a religion or other group will come in between you and that direct connection. Do we have any more comments or questions?
We have a lot of comments and things, but we're going to have to take a break.
All right, well, listeners, you're
Time out.
tuning in to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie. We'll be back after these messages. Welcome back. You're tuning in to Unlocking Your Truth with Dr. Leslie, a talk show about metaphysics and spirituality. And tonight's discussion topic is religion versus spirituality. And it's the final part of the show, so we'd love to hear from the listeners, comments and questions.
Oh, we've got lots of them. Lots and lots and lots and lots.
Cool.
Yeah, and I'm just going to take the latest one from Katie to add it because it refers to the chakras, and she says the book Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Mice does a good job of connecting various religious beliefs with chakras as well.
Good.
Okay, Brian says in response to cases, I think those early experiences did shape a better understanding of God. The contrast helped my beliefs.
Yes, because you know inside of you, don't you, when it feels right or it doesn't feel right. And I think, unfortunately, what happens to a lot of people is it feels wrong, it feels out of alignment, but instead of realizing that the beliefs that are being enforced upon them are what's out of alignment, they start to believe there's something wrong with me and I'm the one that's out of alignment, and why doesn't this feel right to me? I'm bad. So thanks for sharing, Brian.
And another comment from Brian. Brian says, exactly, Corey, such a paradox. How does God give us free will and then punish us if we make the wrong choice? It's amazing. The God in the Bible sounds like a God that has an ego, kind of like the ancient gods worshipped in the ancient Greece and Rome.
Yes, it's hilarious, isn't it? God doesn't have an ego. But this is what we do as humans. We project who we are onto our versions of God.
Yeah. And the thing is, man, there's a saying that says religion wasn't created for God, it was created for man. And when it starts, I mean, you have like Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, if he were to look at religion as it is, I think Jesus Christ would be appalled by what's happened to people in the different religions following him and creating this organization again created by man. You know, like losing the whole concept.
Here's the thing. One of the things about Jesus, he brought the vibration of love and neutrality, vibration of non-judgment. And so it's more like, forgive them, Father, they know not what they do, because it's the lost sheep, isn't it? You are where you are on your journey, you know, and maybe at this point you're a lost sheep.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, Wendy says, I've studied and practiced many different religions, and I've found that some understanding from one assists with the understanding of another.
Yeah, very, very cool, because I mean, I think that there are truths embedded within these belief systems, right? And ultimately, they're all founded on love. And so I think that's true, that there is a lot of overlap between the core truths that are embedded in different religions. And that some of those people that fight on the basis of religion are, what's the word, actually have a lot more in common than they know.
Very much so. And yet the opposite is true of that as well. I remember a fellow that went to a church when I lived in the Maritimes, and he invited me to his church. They were doing some sort of a special Sunday. I can't remember exactly what it was. This was many, many years ago, 30 years ago. And so I went to his service, and come on in, and everybody's welcomed me. The minister met me. It was really great. And so next week we were doing something at our church. He said, "I'd love to invite you to our church." "Oh no, I can't do that." "Why not?" So my minister would crucify me if I did that. He would what do you call it? Ban me from our church. I said, "You're not allowed to come into our church." "No." Very interesting, like it's very interesting in the concepts of different ministerial people. And I'm sure his doctrine states just the opposite. Go out and bring in the lost sheep, like if you think the people in my church are lost sheep, well, send somebody out to bring them in. Don't exclude them from everything. Anyway, this one's from Olive. Olive says, Tibetan Buddhism was influenced by Buddhism from India and the shamanism local to Tibet. The Sanskrit language itself has a lot of gender inequality in it, I believe. And I believe Sanskrit is also associated in a time of patriarchy, colonization, and social hierarchy. So great knowledge and truth, but again, misused by rulership.
Oh, thank you so much, Olive, for sharing that. Olive's doing a course in anthropology, so I imagine she knows a lot about this stuff. And I didn't know that about, the gender inequality in Sanskrit. Or, thanks for reminding us about those origins of Tibetan Buddhism as well. Please share more information with us. That's great.
Yeah, my Sanskrit's a little rusty, so.
Chakra, I know that one.
Okay, this is from Curious Soul. When it becomes an organization and get the human ego involved, some forget the reasons of the faith. They focus on the rules of the hierarchy. A church is a group where the common energy enhances.
Well, that's a good point, George. I believe somebody told me once, and I never looked it up to check, that the original meaning of the word church was just a gathering or group of people. And, it does say in the Bible where one or more are gathered in my name. And the meaning of that is that an energy is amplified when you get multiple people together. So if you get multiple people meditating together, the energy is amplified. If you get multiple people praying together, the energy is amplified. So there are lots and lots of positive reasons for people getting together in a group and combining their energy for positive purposes. And, I suspect that many of the original practices, from these groups, that's what it was all about. I'm sure Jesus and his disciples, that's what it was all about, as opposed to coming and learning a doctrine from, and having beliefs imposed upon you. It was more about sharing your energy and vibration of love.
Yeah, as opposed to a lot of this, Jesus taught how to multiply fish and bread, change water into wine. So churches do a lot of good. Religions do a lot of good, but they screw up a lot of people as well. Yeah. Katie says, we went through that one already. And SG says, I have a question. Everything seems to be slowly improving in my life, but I still feel disconnected to myself and life. Why do I feel outside of myself?
Oh, SG. Well, let's take a look at that. Well, I think you feel outside of yourself because you are outside of yourself. How is that possible? Well, you are spirit, you are not your body. And so it looks to me like there is a disassociation between spirit and body. And so I don't know if you're a regular listener, SG, or not, but there is a free meditation you can download from my website that teaches a grounding technique. And the purpose of that grounding technique is to help you really come, the spiritual consciousness, really come into your body and be present, awake, and aware within your body, and present, awake, and aware within your life. So oftentimes, most people are not really in their body. They're slightly disassociated. They're kind of the spiritual aspects kind of hovering and not really embodied. You know, all of the teachings talk about enlightenment and embodiment, and that's just about your energy, your consciousness coming and being present within the body. So I'm just seeing that you weren't grounded and therefore not quite feeling fully in your life and fully in your body. So that's a very simple but very profound technique that you might try and see if that helps.
Good. Brian says, yes, churches seem like peaceful places. Even if no one is there at the time, you can feel the peaceful energy.
Yeah, thank you for that comment too, Brian, because it's so true, isn't it? And I think that, you know, if you walk into some of the cathedrals in Europe, there is an amazing sense of peace. And I think that, you know, often those places are built on energy spots, actually. They're actually built on sacred sites. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is that, yeah, there can be centuries and centuries of people who, you know, going there and, you know, contemplating, meditating, and praying and gathering together. And I think all of that adds to, you know, the feeling, plus just the beauty of the architecture as well. Although, you know, there are also lots of churches where bloody things have taken place as well. And there was one church in York in England, I remember visiting a long time ago, and they'd put all the Jews inside and set it on fire. And then it's still a church that you can go in today, but that's part of its history. So, yeah, but many of them do feel beautiful and peaceful.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Leslie, we used to go to that spiritualist church earlier on, years ago, before we moved out of town. And I used to go to that church early, 10, 15 minutes early. It was a 100-year-old building, I think it was more than 100 years old, 150 or something. And it was a lovely little old church, and it sat maybe 60 people. But the energy in that church was astounding. It was, I've never felt that connected to the other side as I did in that church. And it was just so peaceful. I could go sit there and just relax, and just everything would disappear for me from the outside world. It was really great. Oh, another comment by SG says, I tried it. I don't know if it was working. I have trouble grounding.
Well, let's look at why you have trouble grounding then, SG. I wonder, FG, if you felt this way your whole life. It does look like there's some energy in your first chakra, which is, it's almost like, I mean, I'd have to sort of sit with you and talk to you a bit longer to find out. But it reminds me of somebody else I was reading today, and they had a birth trauma, I think. And so, you know, sometimes those kind of formative events can leave a kind of a scar relating to your connection to the physical world. So that I do see this block in the first chakra. I'm going to see if I can give you a little hand, because sometimes if I start to move the energy, I'll get a better idea of what that is. I mean, I think it's relating to perhaps feeling like the world isn't a safe place to be in. But there's almost like this little energy device. It's shaped like a T in the first chakra. And it just seems to just divert the energy, prevent the energy from flowing in the direction of the grounding. So I'm going to get my healing guide to see if he can remove that and see if we get any more information about what that is. So remember, SG, actually, you're the one that creates your reality. You're the one with all the power. And the best way to create the life, have your life get better and improve and create the life that you want, is to completely be embodied. And I think that there was a belief that the opposite of that you're powerless and that you are, you know, other people seek to control you. And, you know, it's kind of unpleasant to be here. So it's interesting, we moved it out and then you moved it back in. So let's have another go at moving it out. And tell us in the chat box, SG, if you're feeling any different. Because we're holding an energy of grounding you right now. All right. So do we have any other questions or comments?
Actually, Dr. Leslie, guess what?
Time for the show to end.
Just about, yeah. Last week we lost YouTube. Was it last week or the week before we lost Facebook? This week we lost YouTube about 5 minutes back, or there's still people making comments, but it says an error occurred. Please try again later. Huh, interesting. But yes, it's the end of the show. I'm sorry for everybody else. We can't get to all your questions, but it's a great show.
And you know, if you want to, please put in the chat some suggestions for what you'd like us to talk about next week.
Yeah, and don't forget to like the show and give us a thumbs up there, and give us a thumbs up on YouTube and a like on Facebook. It always helps our ratings with that. More people find us.
Great, thank you so much. See you next.